Do you ever feel a stranger lives inside you? That you can be triggered by a minor comment, shocked by a sudden, bitter thought, or find yourself repeating self-sabotaging patterns you swore you'd break? This is not a moral failing. It is the price of a hidden civil war within your own psyche. You have locked away a part of yourself, and now it is fighting back, wreaking havoc from the shadows of your unconscious. We spend our lives crafting a respectable identity, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lies everything we deny. Our shame, our rage, our primal instincts. This is the shadow. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It gives it power. It leaks out as projection onto others, unexplained anxieties, and the very behaviors that destroy our relationships and goals. To heal, we must turn and face what we have been running from. We construct our identity with great care, brick by brick, creating a fortress of who we believe we are, or more accurately, who we believe we should be. This is the persona, the mask we present to the world to ensure smooth passage through social and professional landscapes. It is a necessary adaptation, a shield, but the great psychological tragedy begins when we mistake this mask for the totality of our being. We identify solely with the good, the kind, the competent, the acceptable. In doing so, we perform an act of profound inner violence. We exile everything within us that does not fit this idealized self-portrait. This rejected material, our raw anger, our primal fears, our forbidden desires, our secret envies, our chaotic creativity, does not simply vanish into some psychological void. It has its own reality, its own vital energy, and it will not be ignored. It coalesces, like a celestial body forming from cosmic dust, into a dense, autonomous psychic entity. This is the birth of the shadow, a second self that lives in the basement of your own mind, a stranger to whom you have given the keys to your house, but whom you refuse to acknowledge. This act of creation is unconscious. You do not decide to form a shadow. You form it by the very act of refusal. Every time you suppress a spike of jealousy and tell yourself you are only ever benevolent, a fragment of that jealousy breaks off and falls into the shadow. Every time you crush a flicker of rage and insist you are endlessly patient, a shard of that rage joins the growing mass. Every time you disown a moment of laziness, a burst of pride, a sexual fantasy, a selfish thought, you are feeding this other. You are, in effect, forcing a part of your own soul to live in the darkness, and like any living thing denied light and recognition, it does not wither, it grows restless, powerful, and cunning. It becomes an independent complex, a splinter personality that operates outside the direct control of your conscious will. It possesses its own crude intelligence, its own agenda, which is fundamentally one of expression. The energies you have denied demand to be lived. This is the central, terrifying mechanism of the unlived life that which you refuse to be, you are forced to become. But you do not become it consciously, or with the integrating power of the ego. You become it as a puppet, manipulated by strings from the darkness. The man who proudly identifies as utterly peaceful and never angry will not experience his own rage directly. Instead, he will find himself perpetually surrounded by enraged people. He will provoke arguments without understanding how. He will be a magnet for road rage incidents. His children will have tantrums in his presence. His colleagues will be inexplicably aggressive towards him. He is projecting his own disowned anger onto the world, and the world, in a cruel mirroring effect, reflects it back at him. He is forced to live in a world of anger, which is the externalized manifestation of his inner reality. He is being forced to experience the very quality he denied, but but from the outside as a victim of it, rather than as its conscious owner. Similarly, the woman who exiles her own ambition and power, believing it to be unfeminine or dangerous, will not feel ambitious. Instead, she will constantly find herself undermined by ambitious rivals. She will feel held back by others, a perpetual victim of their drive and their greed. She is projecting her own latent power outward, and thus she is destined to be in a perpetual struggle with it in the figures of others. She is forced to engage with ambition, but only as a battlefield, not as a source of her own agency. This is the shadow's revenge. It makes you a passive participant in the drama of your own life, a character who believes the plot is being written by external forces, when, in truth, you are the secret playwright of your own misery. The manifestations are not limited to projection. The shadow leaks into conscious life in more direct, though often disguised, ways. It speaks through the Freudian slip, where a word you never intended to say reveals a hidden thought or desire. It erupts in moods that descend upon you like a sudden weather front, moods for which you can find no rational explanation. One moment you are fine, and the next a cloud of bitterness or apathy has enveloped you. This is the shadow's voice, its emotional broadcast. It reveals itself in compulsive behaviors. The third drink you swore you wouldn't have. The cruel comment that flew out of your mouth before you could stop it. The procrastination on a vital project despite all logical incentives to proceed. These are not mere lapses in willpower. They are mutinies staged by the exiled self. The ultimate destruction wrought by the unlived life is this slow, insidious theft of your own autonomy. You believe you are steering the ship of your life by the light of your conscious values and goals, but below decks, the shadow has its hands on the rudder. It steers you toward the very situations, relationships, and failures that embody the qualities you have tried so hard to repress. The person who fears being seen as a fool will, through the shadow's guidance, constantly find themselves in humiliating situations. The person who denies their own dependency will create crises where they are forced to rely on others. The path of your life begins to curve, almost imperceptibly at first, then more sharply, toward the very chaos you sought to avoid. You become the living embodiment of your own refusal. The goal of the persona was to create safety, control, and social acceptance, but the effect of the repressed shadow is to create a life of hidden repetition, predictable crises, and a profound, gnawing sense of inauthenticity, as if you are living a script written by a hostile stranger. And in a very real sense, you are. The conscious mind, in its relentless pursuit of order and light, operates under a fundamental misconceptions. That wholeness is an achievement of the day, a state arrived at by adding more virtue, more knowledge, more control. It believes that the path to a better self is an upward climb, a transcendence of the base and the dark. This is a comforting lie, a narrative that ultimately leads to the arid plateau of the persona, where one is not whole, but merely well defended. The true, numinous state of wholeness, what the ancients might have called the philosopher's stone or the hidden treasure, is not found by climbing upward, but by daring to descend. It is a paradoxical truth that the path to the light wins directly through the heart of the darkness you carry. To become genuinely conscious of the carefully constructed persona, the mask of adaptation, is to simultaneously and inevitably meet its creator, the shadow. They are two sides of a single coin. You cannot look at one without becoming aware of the other. The brighter you try to make the persona, the longer and darker the shadow it casts. This confrontation with what lies beneath is not an act of self-destruction, as the ego fears, but the most sacred and necessary work of a lifetime, the work of reconciliation. This descent is not a passive falling, but an active, courageous undertaking. It is a deliberate turning away from the sunlit fields of conscious identity and a voluntary journey into the interior wilderness, the tangled forest of the unconscious. The ego, which sees itself as the master of the house, must willingly become a student in its own cellar. This requires a suspension of the moralizing judgment that initially created the shadow. You are not descending to condemn the contents of the darkness, for that would merely be a repetition of the original act of exile. You are not going down to call the shadow evil or ugly or wrong. You are going down to meet it, to see it, to listen to it. This is an act of profound curiosity, a radical acceptance that everything within you exists for a reason. The rage you buried was once a necessary fire for your protection. The greed you hid was a distorted cry for your needs to be met. The fear you locked away was the guardian of a vulnerability that felt too great to bear. To look upon these dissound aspects without immediate condemnation is to begin the process of disarming them. You see that the shadow is not merely a refuse bin of sin, but a storehouse of vital, untamed energy that your conscious life has been lacking. This process of confrontation is inherently alchemical. It is the as opus, the great work of turning lead into gold. The base material of your raw, unintegrated impulses, your lead, is not discarded, but subjected to the transformative fire of conscious awareness. When you can feel the surge of jealousy, without being compelled to either act it out or repress it, but instead to hold it in the vessel of your attention, a miracle occurs. The energy bound within that jealousy begins to change its nature. It is no longer a compulsive force that makes you bitter and spiteful. Through the act of conscious holding, it can be transmuted into a capacity for discernment, a sharper understanding of what you truly value, and even a fuel for your own aspirations. The raw, undifferentiated anger, when faced and listened to, can reveal itself as a powerful instinct for justice, a capacity to set firm boundaries, or the intense passion that fuels creative work. The shadow, when befriended, reveals its gold. Its power, which once worked against you in autonomous, destructive eruptions, is reclaimed and integrated into the treasury of the ego, making the entire personality more resilient, more potent, and more real. This movement from fragmentation toward wholeness is not a peaceful, linear progression. It is often experienced as a kind of death and rebirth. The ego's cherished self-image, the pristine persona, must necessarily shatter. To admit that you contain pettiness, laziness, and cruelty alongside your kindness and diligence is a humbling, often terrifying, blow to the ego's pride. It feels like a loss of integrity, when in fact it is the beginning of true integrity. You are trading the fragile integrity of a mask for the robust, flawed, and dynamic integrity of a complete human being. This is the terror of wholeness. It demands that you relinquish the comfort of a simple, one-dimensional story about yourself. You are no longer solely the hero. You must also acknowledge the coward, the trickster, and the villain within your own narrative. This acceptance is the end of self-deception and the beginning of authentic power. The inner enemy, once met with courage and compassion, slowly ceases its guerrilla warfare. It drops its adversarial stance and begins to offer its gifts. The darkness becomes an ally, not in the sense that it becomes good, but in the sense that its energies are now available to the conscious personality. You gain access to a deeper, more instinctual wisdom. your creativity loses its sterility and gains a raw, primal force. Your compassion for others deepens because you have made peace with the same darkness in yourself. You move from being a two-dimensional caricature of an ideal, which is inherently fragile and easily shattered by life's complexities, toward a three-dimensional, grounded, and genuine wholeness. This state is not a static perfection, but a living, breathing tension of opposites, a continuous dialogue between the light and the dark within, where the self is not a finished product, but a perpetual becoming. This is not a call to act out your darkness, but to courageously acknowledge it. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your disowned self. By bringing its contents into the light of conscious awareness, you drain them of their destructive power. This act of integration is the path to true wholeness. You reclaim your projected energy, break compulsive patterns, and end the inner civil war. The goal is not a perfect, sanitized life, but an authentic one where you are no longer a stranger to yourself, but the master of your entire house.